Carl Jung documented a psychological phenomenon that will fundamentally change how you understand your relationships. He discovered that individuals with empathic abilities face what he called the cruelest paradox of human connection. Their greatest gift becomes the source of their deepest pain. Through decades of clinical observation, Jung found that empathic individuals unconsciously attract people who project their shadow onto them. People who resent the empath's emotional freedom because it reminds them of their own emotional numbness. The more authentic and radiant someone with highly developed feeling function becomes, the more they threaten others' psychological defenses. What Jung called shadow projection creates a devastating pattern, where empaths are simultaneously sought after and secretly despised for possessing what others have lost or buried within themselves. Today, I'll reveal Jung's most disturbing discovery about empathic psychology and why he believed this pattern either destroys sensitive individuals completely or transforms them into exactly what humanity needs for its emotional evolution. Have you ever wondered why people seem inexplicably irritated by your kindness, as though they interpret your generosity as judgment against them? Jung discovered this isn't coincidence. It's an alchemical reality woven into the unconscious dynamics between self and other. The pattern that revealed Jung's most chilling insight emerged from multiple cases he observed in his clinical practice. Individuals with extraordinary empathic abilities who seemed to magnetize people that would eventually turn against them with inexplicable hostility. Jung consistently documented what I call luminous emotional authenticity in these patients. They could sense others' pain, instantly respond with genuine compassion, and create safe spaces where people felt truly understood for the first time in their lives. Yet every close relationship followed the same devastating pattern. People would confess their deepest secrets to them, find healing in their presence, and experience profound emotional relief. Then, without warning, they would begin to criticize them, undermine their confidence, and eventually abandon them entirely, often blaming them for being too intense or too much. Jung realized he wasn't observing simple relationship dysfunction. He was witnessing what happens when unconscious people encounter someone who has maintained connection to their authentic feeling function. Authentic emotional expression triggers unconscious shame in those who have betrayed their own emotional truth. If you've ever been criticized for being too emotional or too intense, write this in the comments. My empathy is not too much, others are too numb. Jung's observations led him to identify what modern psychology now recognizes as psychological mirroring theory. When individuals with highly developed feeling function interact with emotionally disconnected people, they unconsciously reflect back the emotional authenticity those people have abandoned. Jung's research revealed that most people disconnect from their authentic emotions early in life as a survival mechanism. They learn to suppress sensitivity, hide vulnerability, and operate from false personas that gain social acceptance, but cost them their emotional aliveness. What I call the authenticity wound shows how people who have cut themselves off from genuine feeling develop unconscious hostility toward those who haven't. The empath's natural emotional expression becomes a painful reminder of what they've lost. Jung observed that empaths fall into what I term the mirror trap. Their authentic presence automatically triggers others' repressed emotions and buried pain. This creates intense discomfort in people who have built their entire identity around emotional numbness. Jung noted something even more disturbing. People often seek out those with empathic gifts specifically because their unconscious recognizes what they've lost. They're drawn to the emotional aliveness they observe, yet simultaneously resent it because it exposes their own emotional death. This creates the fundamental psychological paradox affecting sensitive individuals. Jung's most disturbing discovery about empaths was how they become targets for what he extensively documented as shadow projection, where people unconsciously transfer their own rejected qualities onto the empath, then attack them for possessing these very traits. Through his analytical work, Jung found that people who resent empaths are actually resenting parts of themselves they've disowned. The empath's emotional sensitivity reminds them of their own buried sensitivity. The empath's authenticity exposes their own falsehood. What makes this particularly cruel is that empaths often possess the exact qualities these people once had, but learned to suppress. Jung observed the individual attacks in the empath what they have killed within themselves. The resentment is not toward the empath. It is toward their own abandoned emotional truth. This creates what I call the innocence-punishment dynamic. People who have lost their emotional innocence through trauma or social conditioning unconsciously punish those who have managed to preserve theirs. Comment below if you've attracted people who later turned against you for no clear reason. I recognize shadow projection when I see it. Jung documented how this manifests in subtle but devastating ways. People will criticize empaths for being too sensitive when they themselves wish they could feel deeply again. They'll mock empathic responses as naive when they've simply become cynical to protect themselves from pain. The most insidious aspect is that these attacks often come disguised as concern or advice. You need to toughen up. The world will eat you alive. You're too trusting. These statements reveal the speaker's own emotional wounds while attempting to dim the empath's light. Through his analytical work with empaths and their relationships, Jung identified 4 distinct patterns of how people unconsciously attack empathic individuals for their authentic emotional expression. Type 1, the emotional critic. Jung documented people who specifically target empaths' emotional responses. These individuals have learned to suppress their own feelings so completely that witnessing authentic emotion triggers unconscious shame about their own emotional deadness. What I call feeling police are people who constantly tell empaths their emotions are wrong, excessive, or inappropriate. Type 2, the authenticity attacker. These individuals unconsciously resent empaths for being genuine because they've built their entire identity around false personas. Jung observed how people who live behind masks feel threatened by those who don't need masks to survive. What I term the performance police criticize empaths for being too real or inappropriate when they simply haven't learned to hide their authentic selves behind social facades. If you've ever dimmed your authentic self to make others comfortable, comment. I will no longer shrink to fit their emotional limitations. Type 3, the vulnerability violator. Jung noted people who specifically target empaths' openness and trust. These individuals have been hurt so badly that they've closed their hearts completely, and they unconsciously punish empaths for maintaining emotional availability. What I call the trust destroyers are people who take advantage of empathic openness, then blame empaths for being too trusting rather than acknowledging their own betrayal of that trust. Type 4, the light dimmer. The most dangerous type Jung encountered were people who systematically worked to diminish empaths' confidence in their own gifts. They've disconnected from their own inner light so completely that others' radiance becomes unbearable. What I term the brightness reducers use subtle psychological manipulation to convince empaths that their natural empathy is a problem to be fixed rather than a gift to be honored. Jung identified 3 specific dangers that made this psychological dynamic a serious threat to both individual empaths and collective emotional evolution. Danger 1, the authenticity erosion. Jung observed that constant exposure to resentment and criticism causes many empaths to begin doubting their own emotional reality. They start suppressing their natural responses to fit in with people who can't tolerate authentic emotion. He wrote, "The empath who abandons their authenticity to gain acceptance loses the very quality that made them valuable. They become another emotionally dead person in a world that desperately needs emotional aliveness." This creates what Jung called the dimming epidemic. Empaths learning to hide their light to avoid triggering others' unconscious hostility. Danger due psychological self-betrayal. Jung documented how empaths often internalize the criticism they receive, beginning to see their empathy as a flaw rather than a gift. They start believing they're too much or too sensitive, instead of recognizing that others are often too little and too numb. Danger 3. Collective emotional stagnation. Most dangerously, Jung found that when empaths learn to suppress their authenticity, humanity loses its emotional pioneers, the individuals capable of modeling what healthy emotional expression looks like. Jung called this emotional evolution arrest, when the people most capable of advancing collective emotional intelligence are forced into hiding to protect themselves from unconscious attacks. He wrote, "The suppression of empathic individuals represents humanity's unconscious rejection of its own emotional potential. We attack in others what we most need to reclaim within ourselves." This is why Jung considered the protection and development of empathic individuals essential for human psychological advancement. Jung developed what I call the authentic self-preservation protocol, a systematic approach to maintaining empathic gifts while protecting against unconscious projection from others. If you found people who celebrate rather than criticize your empathic gifts, write, "I found my tribe." Those who appreciate authentic feeling. Phase 1. Recognition and validation. Jung taught individuals with empathic gifts to first recognize that the resentment they face isn't personal. It's shadow projection from people who have lost connection to their own feeling function. Jung understood that hatred directed toward their authenticity is actually self-hatred being projected outward. The empathic individual is not the problem. They are the mirror reflecting someone else's inner wound. Phase 2. Boundary crystallization. Jung discovered that those with empathic abilities need what I call energetic boundaries, the ability to maintain their authentic expression while protecting themselves from others' unconscious projections. Comment below if you're ready to protect your empathic nature while serving those who can receive it. I choose conscious empathy over unconscious absorption. This involves learning to distinguish between genuine feedback that serves individuation and projection-based attacks designed to dim their authentic self-expression. Jung called this developing psychological discernment. Phase 3. Selective engagement. The final phase involves what Jung called conscious relationship choices, the ability to connect deeply with people who appreciate authenticity while maintaining distance from those who resent it. Jung's approach emphasized that empathic individuals serve no one by dimming their feeling function to accommodate those who prefer emotional numbness. Their authentic expression is medicine for those ready to heal and mirror for those ready to see. This requires developing what I call vibrational matching, attracting people who resonate with authenticity rather than those who fear it. Jung's insights extended beyond clinical work to include historical figures who successfully maintained their empathic nature despite facing resentment for their emotional authenticity. The case of St. Francis of Assisi, successful integration. Jung studied how Francis maintained radical empathy and emotional openness despite criticism from religious authorities who preferred emotional suppression. Francis faced constant criticism for being too emotional and too compassionate. Yet he never dimmed his empathic response to suffering. Jung noted that Francis's success came from recognizing that criticism of his empathy revealed the spiritual poverty of his critics rather than flaws in his own nature. The case of Vincent van Gogh, unprotected sensitivity. Jung observed how Van Gogh's extraordinary empathic perception created incredible art, but also made him vulnerable to others' unconscious resentment of his emotional intensity. Van Gogh's letters reveal how people consistently criticized him for being too much, too emotional, too intense, too sensitive. Unlike Francis, Van Gogh internalized these criticisms and began attacking his own empathic nature. Jung emphasized that empaths need what he called vibrational sanctuary. relationships with others who appreciate rather than resent authentic emotional expression. Jung wrote, "The empath cannot thrive in emotional isolation, yet they cannot survive in relationships with those who attack their authenticity. They must create conscious community with others who celebrate rather than suppress emotional aliveness." Type 1. Fellow empathic individuals. Jung identified the importance of connecting with others who share empathic gifts. These relationships are characterized by mutual recognition, emotional safety, and appreciation for sensitivity rather than criticism of it. Type 2. Emotionally evolved non-empaths. Jung observed that some people, while not naturally empathic, have done enough psychological work to appreciate and protect empathic individuals. They recognize empathy as a gift rather than a flaw. Type 3. Conscious light appreciators. Jung identified people who, regardless of their own empathic abilities, consciously choose to support and protect authentic emotional expression in others. They understand that empathic individuals serve an important function in collective emotional evolution. Jung developed specific indicators for identifying safe relationships. They ask about your emotional experiences with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. They appreciate your empathic insights rather than criticizing your sensitivity. They protect your emotional energy rather than draining it. They encourage your authentic expression rather than asking you to dim it. Jung emphasized, "The goal is not to hide your light, but to share it with those who can appreciate its beauty rather than resent its brightness." Jung viewed successful empath development as essential not just for individual well-being, but for collective emotional advancement toward more authentic human connection. The 4 stages of light integration. Stage 1. Recognition without suppression. The first transformation occurs when empaths learn to recognize resentment directed toward them as projection rather than accurate feedback. Jung called this projection immunity. Jung observed, "Wisdom begins when the empath stops believing that others' inability to tolerate their light means they should dim it. The problem lies not in being too much, but in others becoming too little." Stage 2. Boundary development without hardening. The second stage involves creating energetic protection while maintaining emotional openness. Jung called this selective permeability, the ability to remain empathic while protecting against projection. Stage 3. Community creation without compromise. The third transformation happens when empaths stop trying to gain acceptance from those who resent authenticity and instead focus on building relationships with those who appreciate it. Stage 4. Service without sacrifice. The final stage involves what Jung called authentic service, using empathic gifts to help others while maintaining strong boundaries against those who would exploit or resent these abilities. Jung observed, "The fully integrated empath serves from overflow rather than depletion. They give their gifts to those who can receive them without demanding acceptance from those who cannot." Jung documented specific pitfalls that can derail empaths' journey toward authentic self-preservation. Pitfall 1. The revenge trap. Jung observed that some empaths, upon recognizing how they've been treated, develop resentment toward those who attack their authenticity. He warned that the empath who responds to unconscious attack with conscious attack has learned the wrong lesson. Pitfall 2. The superiority complex. Jung documented cases where empaths use their understanding of unconscious dynamics to feel superior to those who resent their authenticity. Jung wrote, "The empath who believes their emotional aliveness makes them better than others has missed the point entirely. Their gift is meant to serve healing, not to create hierarchy." Pitfall 3. The isolation justification. Jung observed that some empaths use their understanding of projection to justify complete withdrawal from challenging relationships. He noted, True integration requires the empath to maintain their authenticity while remaining compassionately available to those ready to receive their gifts. Pitfall 4. The light dimming. Most dangerously, Jung found that some empaths, despite understanding the dynamics, still chose to suppress their authenticity to avoid conflict. Jung emphasized that understanding why others attack your light does not eliminate the pain of being attacked. Jung developed ongoing practices for maintaining authentic expression while protecting against projection. Regular assessment of which relationships support versus drain your empathic gifts. Conscious choice about when to engage empathically and when to maintain protective boundaries. Connection with others who share similar experiences and challenges. Recognition that some people may never be able to appreciate authentic emotion. Jung understood empathic psychology within the context of collective emotional evolution, viewing authentic empathic individuals as essential for humanity's advancement toward more genuine emotional expression. Jung believed that individuals who maintain their feeling function despite unconscious attack serve as evidence that emotional aliveness is possible even in an emotionally disconnected world. They are emotional pioneers, showing others the path back to their own hearts. Consider the great empathic leaders throughout history. Gandhi maintained radical compassion while facing violent opposition. Martin Luther King Jr. held space for both justice and love, refusing to let others' hatred poison his heart. These individuals faced massive projection from those who couldn't tolerate their emotional authenticity. Yet they understood that their light served a purpose beyond personal comfort. They were willing to endure unconscious attacks to model what emotional evolution looks like. Jung believed that in the modern era, empaths might be sensing and responding to collective emotional trauma that needs conscious processing. The widespread disconnection from authentic feeling in modern society creates what Jung called collective emotional starvation. Empaths unconsciously feel this collective hunger for authentic connection. This is why they often feel overwhelmed in crowded places or emotionally drained after watching the news. They're absorbing not just individual projections, but collective emotional pain. Understanding this larger context helps empaths realize their sensitivity serves an evolutionary purpose. They're not broken or too much. They're responding to real collective needs that most people have learned to ignore. Jung's insight reveals that the empathic individual feels collectively what others feel individually but suppress. Their emotional responses often reflect what the entire culture needs to process consciously, but avoids through distraction and numbness. The service through authenticity becomes Jung's crucial insight. Those with empathic gifts serve others best not by dimming their feeling function to make others comfortable, but by maintaining their authenticity to show others what emotional aliveness looks like. Jung understood that empathic individuals serve humanity not by becoming emotionally numb like everyone else, but by remaining emotionally alive despite everyone else. Their authenticity is medicine for a world suffering from what I call emotional evolution arrest. The ultimate integration, Jung observed, occurs when empaths learn to hold their gifts with both strength and compassion, maintaining their authenticity while understanding that others' resentment comes from pain rather than malice. What I call luminous compassion represents the ability to shine their light fully while having empathy for those who cannot yet tolerate that brightness. This is the highest level of empathic development, being simultaneously strong and tender, authentic and compassionate. Jung's work with empaths began with a striking observation. He noticed that certain individuals, those with an extraordinary capacity to feel deeply and connect authentically, often found themselves caught in a painful relational pattern. Their warmth and emotional openness seemed to draw people in like moths to a flame, only for those same people to turn against them with hostility, criticism, or rejection. Jung called this the empath's paradox. The very gift that made them magnetic also made them targets for unconscious resentment. But rather than seeing this as a flaw in the empath, Jung recognized it as a reflection of the other person's inner disconnection. The hostility wasn't about the empath's sensitivity. It was a projection of grief over the emotional aliveness the critic had suppressed within themselves. To understand this paradox more deeply, Jung developed what he termed the mirror theory of empathic attraction. He observed that empaths unconsciously serve as living mirrors, reflecting back to others the emotional capacity they've abandoned or suppressed. This mirroring function operates on multiple psychological levels. At the conscious level, people are drawn to empaths because their authenticity feels refreshing in a world of emotional masks. However, at the unconscious level, this same authenticity triggers what Jung called shadow envy, a deep resentment toward qualities the observer has disowned in themselves. Jung documented specific patterns of shadow projection that empaths consistently encounter. The first pattern involves vitality envy, where emotionally numbed individuals attack the empath's aliveness because it reminds them of their own deadened state. The second pattern, authenticity threat, occurs when people perceive the empath's genuineness as an implicit criticism of their own performative existence. The third pattern, emotional overwhelm projection, happens when others blame empaths for making them feel too much, when in reality, the empath has simply created space for suppressed emotions to surface. These projections follow predictable stages that Jung mapped through extensive case studies. The attraction phase draws people to the empath's energy like a healing balm. The idealization phase elevates the empath to unrealistic heights, often as a savior figure. The discomfort phase emerges when the empath's presence begins triggering unprocessed emotions. The devaluation phase involves attacking or criticizing the empath to recreate emotional distance. Finally, the abandonment phase occurs when the person flees the relationship rather than facing their own emotional work. Understanding these patterns was revolutionary for Jung's empathic patients. Instead of internalizing criticism as evidence of their inadequacy, they learned to recognize it as predictable responses to their gift. This reframing became the foundation for developing what Jung called empathic resilience, the ability to remain open-hearted while maintaining psychological sovereignty. Jung's first stage involved what he called archeological work, excavating the layers of conditioning that taught empaths to diminish themselves. He used a technique called criticism mapping, where patients would trace back every major criticism they'd received to identify patterns. Often these criticisms revealed more about the critic's psychological state than about the empath's behavior. Through detailed case analysis, Jung discovered that empaths typically received 3 categories of criticism: intensity shaming, you're too emotional; boundary violations, you're too sensitive; and authenticity attacks, you're too much. Each category corresponded to specific shadow projections from emotionally disconnected individuals. Intensity shaming came from those who feared their own emotional depth. Boundary violations originated from people who'd learned to override others' needs. Authenticity attacks emerged from individuals trapped in performative personas. Jung developed a revolutionary exercise called the mirror reversal technique. When an empath received criticism, they would ask, "What quality in me is this person unable to access in themselves?" This question transformed painful encounters into psychological insights. The person attacking their emotional expression was actually revealing their own emotional starvation. The individual criticizing their authenticity was confessing their own fear of genuineness. This archeological process often revealed that empaths had internalized a false narrative, that their sensitivity was a burden rather than a gift. Jung traced this conditioning to childhood experiences, where their emotional authenticity was met with dismissal, overwhelm, or attack from caregivers who couldn't handle their own feelings, let alone support a child's emotional development. The integration work involved grieving these early losses, while reclaiming their right to feel deeply. As empaths began to trust their emotional truth, Jung introduced the concept of energetic boundaries. He saw that many empaths, in their desire to connect, gave too much of themselves to those who were emotionally unavailable or manipulative. This left them drained, reinforcing the false belief that their sensitivity was a weakness. To counter this, Jung taught practices to protect their energy while remaining open to authentic connection. Picture an empath, visualizing a shield of light around their heart before entering a challenging conversation. This shield doesn't block connection. It filters out projections and demands that could sap their vitality. By setting these boundaries, empaths learn to give from a place of fullness rather than depletion, preserving their emotional aliveness for those who could receive it. Jung's boundary work was sophisticated, recognizing that empaths needed different types of protection for different situations. He developed what he called the boundary spectrum, ranging from permeable boundaries for intimate relationships to crystalline barriers for hostile environments. The art lay in learning to adjust these boundaries consciously rather than unconsciously absorbing everything around them. The first boundary type Jung taught was the emotional filter, a practice of consciously distinguishing between one's own feelings and absorbed emotions from others. Empaths learn to ask, does this feeling have my signature energy, or am I picking up someone else's emotional state? This simple question helped them avoid taking responsibility for others' unprocessed emotions while remaining compassionate witnesses to pain. The second boundary Jung emphasized was the energy economics boundary, which involved assessing whether relationships were energetically reciprocal or draining. He taught empaths to notice which interactions left them feeling expanded versus depleted. This wasn't about selfishness, but about sustainable service. An empath who gave from depletion eventually had nothing left to offer anyone, while one who maintained their vitality could serve from overflow. Jung also introduced the concept of graduated vulnerability, teaching empaths to share their emotional depth in stages, rather than offering complete openness immediately. This protected them from people who might weaponize their vulnerability, while allowing genuine connections to develop naturally. Like a flower opening gradually to the sun, empaths learn to reveal themselves to those who had earned the privilege of witnessing their full emotional range. The next phase of Jung's method was about finding what he called vibrational alignment. Empaths, he observed, were often surrounded by people who resented their light because it exposed their own emotional numbness. But Jung believed that every empath could find a tribe, a community of souls who celebrated their sensitivity rather than attacked it. These were the healers, artists, and seekers who valued emotional truth and saw the empath's gifts as a source of nourishment. For many of Jung's patients, connecting with this tribe was a turning point. They no longer felt alone or misunderstood. Instead, they found spaces where their authenticity was a strength, not a liability. In today's world, this might mean joining an online community of conscious empaths, attending a workshop on emotional intelligence, or simply forming friendships with those who honor your emotional depth. The key is to seek relationships that mirror your commitment to living authentically. Jung's concept of tribal recognition extended beyond simple like-mindedness. He identified specific characteristics of what he called empath-compatible individuals. These people demonstrated emotional courage, the willingness to feel difficult emotions rather than projecting them onto others. They showed curiosity about inner worlds rather than judgment about emotional expression. They practiced reciprocal vulnerability, sharing their own depth rather than using empaths as emotional dumping grounds. Jung also recognized that empaths often stayed in incompatible relationships due to what he termed rescue fantasy addiction. They believed their love could heal others' emotional wounds, not realizing that healing must be chosen by the individual themselves. This pattern kept empaths trapped in cycles of giving to those who couldn't receive, while avoiding the vulnerable work of connecting with equally sensitive souls. To break this pattern, Jung developed exercises in resonance recognition. Empaths learned to identify the felt sense of being with someone who matched their emotional frequency. These interactions felt nourishing rather than draining, expansive rather than constrictive. The other person's presence invited the empath's authenticity rather than triggering shame or self-protection. Jung observed that when empaths found their tribe, they often experienced what he called the great relief, a profound exhale after years of holding their breath in incompatible environments. This relief wasn't just personal, it was collective. Each empath who found their tribe strengthened the network of conscious connection, making it easier for other sensitive souls to locate their people. As empaths grew in self-awareness and found their tribe, Jung guided them toward a profound shift, serving from wholeness. He believed that empaths who gave from depletion risked burnout and perpetuated the myth that sensitivity equals weakness. In contrast, those who served from overflow became what he called luminous warriors, individuals who embodied both strength and sensitivity, offering their gifts without sacrificing their essence. This required a commitment to self-care practices that replenished their energy. Meditation time in nature, creative expression, or connecting to a spiritual source became anchors for these empaths. Imagine an empath starting each day with a gratitude ritual, grounding themselves in their own worth before stepping into the world. This practice ensured they could hold space for others' healing without losing themselves in the process. The luminous warrior phase represented the full integration of empathic gifts with personal power. Jung observed that empaths at this stage no longer needed to choose between sensitivity and strength. They embodied both qualities simultaneously. This integration created what he called paradoxical presence, the ability to be simultaneously soft and strong, open and boundaried, compassionate and discerning. Jung identified several characteristics of luminous warriors. First, they practiced sovereign compassion, offering their gifts freely while maintaining energetic autonomy. They didn't need others to validate their sensitivity because they'd claimed it as a strength themselves. Second, they demonstrated fierce gentleness, the ability to set firm boundaries with a loving heart. They could say no to draining demands while remaining open to authentic connection. Third, luminous warriors embodied integrated power, using their sensitivity as a source of strength rather than vulnerability. They'd learned to trust their emotional intelligence as a form of wisdom, making decisions based on both feeling and thinking. Fourth, they practiced conscious service, choosing how and when to offer their gifts rather than compulsively rescuing everyone around them. Jung noted that luminous warriors often became natural leaders in their communities, not through force or manipulation, but through their authentic presence. Their integration inspired others to pursue their own emotional healing, creating ripples of transformation that extended far beyond their immediate circle. Jung's vision for empaths extended far beyond personal transformation. He saw them as vital catalysts for humanity's emotional evolution, especially in an era marked by growing disconnection. As industrialization and societal pressures distanced people from their feeling function, empaths became keepers of emotional truth, bridges between humanity's past and its potential future. Jung identified several ways they served this collective role. First, empaths acted as emotional early warning systems. Their sensitivity allowed them to detect collective dysfunction like rising anger or suppressed grief before it erupted into crisis. Picture an empath feeling overwhelmed in a community where unaddressed pain festers. Their discomfort is a signal urging the collective to confront its buried emotions before they become destructive. Jung's research revealed that empaths function as sophisticated emotional detection systems for their communities. Their nervous systems, more attuned to subtle energetic shifts, often register collective emotional disturbances before they manifest in obvious ways. This sensitivity made them valuable assets in understanding group dynamics and social movements. Jung documented cases where empaths in his practice reported feeling inexplicably agitated or distressed, only to later discover that their communities were processing collective trauma or approaching social upheaval. He theorized that empaths' expanded emotional awareness allowed them to pick up on the emotional weather of their environment, sensing brewing storms before they became visible to others. This radar function operated on multiple levels. At the family level, empaths often sensed when family systems were under stress, even when family members maintained superficial harmony. At the community level, they detected rising tensions, suppressed conflicts, or collective grief before these issues surfaced publicly. At the societal level, some empaths reported feeling collective anxiety during periods of political uncertainty or social change. Jung encouraged empaths to develop what he called interpretive sensitivity, the ability to distinguish between personal emotions and collective emotional currents. This skill helped them avoid taking on responsibility for collective pain while still serving as valuable witnesses to emotional truth. When an empath felt overwhelmed by collective energy, Jung taught them to ask, "What is this feeling trying to tell the group?" This reframing transformed their overwhelm into valuable information. Second, empaths served as emotional translators, giving language to feelings that others couldn't name. In Jung's practice, he saw empaths help their peers process grief, anger, or joy by articulating what was unspoken. This role is crucial in a world where emotional illiteracy is rampant. By naming the unnameable, empaths help others reclaim their emotional truth, paving the way for collective healing. Third, empaths modeled authenticity, proving that vulnerability and strength can coexist. Their willingness to feel deeply in an emotionally numb world inspired others to drop their defenses, creating ripples of genuine connection. Finally, empaths acted as healing catalysts, shifting the emotional atmosphere wherever they went. Their presence invited others to relax into authenticity, or revealed those too guarded to connect, depending on their readiness for emotional truth. Jung observed that empaths possessed an innate ability to access and articulate the emotional undercurrents that others felt but couldn't express. This translation function served multiple purposes in collective healing. First, it validated others' experiences by giving words to nameless feelings. Many people suffered from what Jung called emotional aphasia, the inability to identify or express their inner states. When empaths articulated these feelings, it provided relief and recognition. Second, emotional translation helped groups process collective experiences. Jung noted that empaths often became the spokespersons for family pain, community grief, or organizational dysfunction. Their willingness to name difficult truths created space for collective processing and healing. Without this translation function, painful emotions often remained buried, festering into more destructive forms. Jung also recognized that empaths' modeling function extended beyond individual interactions. Their very existence challenged cultural norms that equated emotional expression with weakness. By living authentically, empaths demonstrated alternative ways of being in the world, ways that honored the full spectrum of human experience, rather than demanding emotional suppression. The healing catalyst function, Jung observed, was perhaps the most profound. Empaths' presence seemed to create what he called authenticity fields, energetic spaces where others felt permission to be genuine. This phenomenon occurred even when empaths weren't actively trying to heal anyone. Their integrated presence simply invited others to relax their defensive masks and connect with their own emotional truth. In today's world, Jung's predictions about collective disconnection feel eerily accurate. The rise of mental health challenges, social isolation, and environmental crises points to a society increasingly detached from its emotional core. Yet this crisis also presents an opportunity. As more people hunger for authentic connection, empaths are being called to step into leadership roles as guides, healers, and advocates for emotional truth. But this calling comes with challenges. The constant stimuli of digital culture, the pressure to conform to shallow norms, and the risk of burnout from others' demands can overwhelm even the most resilient empath. Jung's integration method offers a lifeline, providing tools to navigate these challenges while embracing their purpose. Jung's principles take on new urgency in our hyper-connected yet emotionally disconnected world. Modern empaths face unique challenges that Jung could only begin to anticipate. The digital realm presents a particular problem, and the ability to sense others' emotional states becomes overwhelming when exposed to the collective emotional output of social media platforms. Jung's contemporary followers have developed what they call digital boundary protocols, based on his original methods. These include scheduled disconnection periods, curated online environments that support rather than drain empathic sensitivity, and practices for energetically cleansing after online interactions. The key insight remains Jung's original observation: empaths must learn to distinguish between their own emotions and absorbed energetic content. The modern application also recognizes that empaths in the digital age often find their tribes online rather than in geographic communities. This presents both opportunities and challenges. Virtual connections can provide validation and support across great distances, but they can also lack the grounding quality of in-person interaction that empaths particularly need. Jung's emphasis on creativity and self-expression finds new relevance in digital platforms that allow empaths to share their gifts with global audiences. Many modern empaths become writers, artists, coaches, or healers using digital tools to reach those who need their particular form of emotional translation and healing. Contemporary applications of Jung's work also recognize that empaths often feel called to environmental and social justice causes. Their sensitivity to suffering extends beyond individual pain to collective and planetary distress. This expanded awareness requires additional integration work to avoid becoming overwhelmed by the scope of global challenges. Modern empaths learn to practice what Jung's followers call engaged detachment, remaining emotionally available to serve causes they care about while maintaining enough distance to avoid burnout. This might involve focusing on specific local issues rather than trying to heal all global pain, or developing practices that transform overwhelm into sustainable action. Jung's concept of serving from overflow becomes crucial in activist contexts. Empaths who give from depletion may burn out quickly, while those who maintain their own emotional well-being can sustain their service over time. This isn't selfish, it's strategic. The world needs empaths to remain functional and healthy so they can continue their healing work. Jung's concept of morphic resonance offers a hopeful vision for what happens when empaths embrace their role. He believed that every empath who chooses authenticity over approval strengthens a collective field of emotional truth. Like a tuning fork, their aliveness attunes others to their own buried feelings, creating a ripple effect that makes it easier for everyone to reconnect with their heart. Each time you choose to shine your light, whether by setting a boundary, sharing your truth, or holding space for another's healing, you contribute to this field. Over time, these individual acts of courage could shift societal norms, prioritizing emotional intelligence over disconnection. Jung's followers have developed the concept of empathic tipping point. The idea that as more empaths integrate their gifts and step into conscious service, they create a morphic field that makes it easier for others to access their own emotional intelligence. This phenomenon suggests that empaths aren't just healing individuals, they're participating in a species-wide evolution toward greater emotional awareness. This perspective reframes the empath's journey from personal healing to cosmic service. Every empath who learns to honor their sensitivity while maintaining their strength contributes to humanity's collective emotional evolution. Their integrated presence makes it slightly easier for everyone to feel to connect to life authentically. The vision extends to future generations. Jung believed that as empaths learn to value their gifts, they would raise children who never learned to suppress their emotional truth in the first place. These children would grow into adults who saw sensitivity as strength, who valued emotional intelligence as much as intellectual ability, who could connect authentically without fear or shame. Modern technology allows empaths to connect across geographical boundaries, creating global networks of support and service. These networks operate on Jung's principles of tribal recognition and vibrational alignment, allowing empaths to find their people regardless of location. These networks also facilitate collective healing work that extends beyond individual relationships. Groups of empaths can focus their combined awareness on global challenges, serving as early warning systems for collective dysfunction and catalysts for positive change. While this might sound mystical, Jung saw it as the natural evolution of human empathic capacity. The networks also preserve and transmit empathic wisdom across generations. As integrated empaths share their knowledge and experience, they create resources for emerging empaths who might otherwise struggle alone with their sensitivity. This is the legacy Jung envisioned for empaths, not just personal empowerment, but a collective awakening. Your sensitivity is not a flaw to be hidden, but a gift to be shared wisely. The resentment you've faced is not a sign of your inadequacy, but a reflection of the world's unhealed wounds. By protecting your light and serving from wholeness, you become a luminous warrior, a keeper of feeling in a world that has forgotten how to feel. Your journey is both deeply personal and profoundly collective, connecting you to a global community of empaths working to heal humanity, one authentic interaction at a time. If Jung's insights resonate with you, explore more through my video, The Day the Empath Snaps, Carl Jung's Most Terrifying Case, where I dive into the psychological dynamics of empathic transformation and the path to psychological sovereignty. Share this message with other empaths who need to understand why they attract resentment and how to transform it into purposeful service. Your story matters. By sharing the specific types of criticism or hostility you've faced, you help others see they're not alone. Together, we're building a network of conscious empaths, each shining their light to illuminate the path toward a more emotionally alive world. Your empathic nature doesn't need permission to shine. It doesn't need justification or explanation. It simply needs protection and wise expression. The world is waiting for your gifts, not dimmed to appease others' discomfort, but burning brightly to guide humanity home to its heart. Step boldly into your role as a bridge between humanity's emotionally disconnected past and its integrated future. Your light is not just your own, it's humanity's hope for a more compassionate, connected tomorrow.